I'd like to now take a look at another very well-known Alexander Alekhine game, and this time he was playing against the famous Richard Reti at the Baden-Baden Super Tournament in 1925. This tournament was arguably one of Alekhine's best results, having won it with 16 points out of 20 against a very, very strong field. All of the best players of the time were there. The likes of Rubinstein, Bogliabov, Tarkova, Marshall and Tarash, just to name a few. So the fact that he scored such a massive result against these players was really seen as an achievement. And this game here against Reti was, again, one of his own personal favourites, and it was really spectacular. Another typical combinative masterpiece by Alekhine, who in these complications seemed to thrive as a player. And even Reti, who we should give him some credit in this game, really fought hard and tried to find the best defence, simply couldn't cope with the maze of complications, and Alekhine came out on top. Now, the game started out 1g3. Now, already we reach an interesting moment because, as we all know, Reti founded the Reti opening, which starts with 1 knight f3. So it's curious to see him play g3 on the first move. But from a psychological standpoint, Alekhine's response is a really fascinating one, because he plays the move e5. Now, clearly this move wouldn't have been possible had Reti played the move knight f3 on the first move. So in many ways he's, in inverted commas, taking advantage of the fact that white hasn't played knight f3. Of course, we all know that g3 on the first move, followed by most other replies, is absolutely fine, as we've seen by modern theory. But here, it was in an already very interesting moment. You would expect white to play bishop g2 or a move like c4. These are all very standard type Reti English moves. But Reti in the game played knight f3. Objectively speaking, this isn't a bad move, but it allows black to enter into, ironically, an Alekhine's reversed position after the move e4. So we would actually get this position after e4, knight f6. That would be the Alekhine's defense, 1 e4 and then knight f6. But here we have the same position, except we've got the move g3 inserted. And the big question is, of course, whether g3 helps white. It probably does, because white can get developed really quickly via bishop g2. But it's interesting to see how the openings that these two guys founded has actually been played in some way in this game. Okay, so knight f3, e4. So the question is, where do you put the knight? Well, of course, you put it on d4. d5 was played here. c5 has also been seen before to chase the knight like this. And again, it's another Alekhine reverse position, but this should be okay for white, who is going to try and play d3 to break these pawns open. But instead, Alekhine played d5, d3. This is pretty standard stuff. White has to challenge in the center, otherwise black will follow up with c5, and then this knight may in fact have a lot of problems on d4. So d3, ed3, queen d3, knight f6, and here bishop g2. It's interesting to note, before we go down the main line, that more typically a move like c takes d3 is seen in these Alekhine positions when the fianchetto is there. So I think nowadays almost everybody would take back with the c pawn rather than the queen. But queen takes d3 was Reti's choice. Knight f6, bishop g2, and now bishop b4 check. Again, we see this check that Alekhine was so used to playing. I doubt it's the best move, but he played it anyway. Something like bishop e7 again, just to develop modestly, was preferable. But bishop b4 check, and now this allowed white to exchange off a few pieces. Castles, c4. Well, and now knight a6. The idea of c4 is, of course, to pressurize down this diagonal here, put some pressure on this pawn center. So that's quite a normal move. And here, Alekhine played knight a6, which is not a bad move at all. Another idea is just to kick this knight away on d4, and after a move like knight c2 to play d4 and try and claim that these pawns are cramping white. But, okay, it's another game. b4, for example, would be an idea, and this is getting all a bit crazy. So knight a6 instead is an absolutely reasonable idea, because the point is that when you take on d5, you now reroute the knight, attacking the queen, so you gain a tempo, and now capture back in the center. And here, knight to b3. Okay, so white is looking to put a knight on c5. The knight on c5 in these positions can be quite dangerous, actually, because of this weak b7 point. So Alekhine played c6. That's a good move, blunting out the bishop and supporting the knight on d5. Castles and rook e8. So basically the opening phase has ended. Both sides are castled. Both sides are close to completing development. How to assess this position? Well, it's about level at the moment. Maybe white is slightly better because of the pressure he has on black's queen side, but not really too much going on at the moment. No major imbalances. So Reti continued rook fd1, and now bishop g4. Rook d2, well, he wants to double on the d file and protect e2. And now queen c8. This is an interesting move by Alekhine, protecting the b7 pawn and potentially threatening something like bishop h3. And indeed, after knight c5, seemingly preventing black playing bishop h3 because of the weakness on b7, well, he played bishop h3 anyway. So my first real question is, why can white not simply win a pawn after bishop takes bishop, queen takes bishop, and then knight takes pawn on b7? Have a think about that and join me for part 2 to see exactly why he can or can't simply win a pawn.